As usual, you want to focus in on that first sentence of the first paragraph and read that. Caffeine, the stimulant in coffee, has been called the most widely used psychoactive substance on Earth. Okay, so here we have the author introducing caffeine as being widely used. And is that enough just to read that first sentence? And it's not, because we want to figure out, the author is introducing this concept of caffeine, and what is the author's opinion, or what does the author go from here? So we need to read the next sentence. Snyder, Daly, and Bruns have recently proposed that caffeine affects behavior by countering the activity in the human brain of a naturally occurring chemical called adenosine. So it seems to be that after introducing caffeine, the author cites some people proposing that caffeine affects behavior by countering the activity in the human brain. So it seems to be that the rest of this paragraph is going to go into some science behind how caffeine affects behavior through some mechanisms in the brain. And I think we can skip through this rest of the paragraph and assume that it's going to talk about science behind caffeine affecting behavior and ways it does that in the brain. Next, for many years, caffeine's effects have been attributed to its inhibition of the production of phosphodiesterase, an enzyme that breaks down the chemical called cyclic AMP. So for many years, caffeine's effects have been attributed to its inhibition of the production. So it's inhibiting. Caffeine's effects are caused by the inhibition of some chemical that's produced. And it seems to be that the rest of this paragraph is going to talk about that science. The effects have been attributed to the inhibition of the production. How is that inhibited? How is that production of this enzyme being inhibited? And we jump over to the next paragraph. To buttress their case that caffeine acts instead by preventing adenosine binding. So that's funny, they said instead. So we know here it says, for many years caffeine's effects have been attributed to the inhibition of the production of some enzyme. And this is the thinking for many years. And now they're saying to buttress their case that caffeine acts instead by preventing adenosine binding. The author is offering a different perspective. So the first perspective is that the cause was by the inhibition of some enzyme, and the new one is this, something that's preventing adenosine binding. To prove that case, Snyder compared the stimulatory effects of a series of caffeine derivatives with their ability to dislodge adenosine from its receptors in the brain. So some kind of scientific experiment that Snyder did to support this new thinking. And now we jump over to our last paragraph. There were some apparent exceptions to the general correlation observed between adenosine receptors binding and stimulation. And so it seems to be that this paragraph was talking about adenosine binding, and here it's saying that there are some exceptions to the general correlation observed. So there is a general correlation observed here, but there are exceptions here. Now we focus in on this phrase here, one of these, that's basically saying that we see the rest of this paragraph is going to continue supporting or giving examples of these exceptions. And so we know this paragraph is all about exceptions. And getting to the last sentence, even caffeine, which is generally known for its stimulatory effects, displays this property, which something they talked about before, depressing mouse locomotion at very low concentrations and stimulating it at higher ones. So basically giving two effects for caffeine that are generally overlooked. So if we recap, we have the author introducing this concept of caffeine and that it's widely used, and then proposing or citing somebody that proposed that caffeine affects behavior through these mechanisms in the brain. And for many years, the cause of caffeine's effects were thought of as this particular reason for many years, and I guess more recently there has been a new thinking, something related to preventing adenosine binding, and we go into some examples for that. And we know from this paragraph that they're talking about some correlation between adenosine receptors and stimulation, which is observed in this paragraph, but then there are some exceptions. And ultimately we come to the conclusion that caffeine has not only stimulating effects at high concentrations, but also depressing effects on locomotion. So caffeine actually has a two-sided effect. And so that's the general outline of this passage, and by connecting the dots from the main ideas or the topical sentences from each paragraph. And I think we're now ready to answer questions.